10 million Canadians won't have a family doctor by the end of the decade. With an aging population, this is unacceptable. The Liberals have been dragging their feet for years on health care, while the Conservatives' answer is to make people pay for that care. Despite the Liberals' announcements, the pan-Canadian licensure for doctors is still not a reality, which would get more people connected with a doctor. Why are the Liberals dragging their feet on this simple health solution?
Good.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would say to the honourable member that was an absolutely critical point of conversation at the last health ministers meeting, where we've committed to doing that. In fact, you take a look at what was done in the Atlantic provinces. We're moving forward with exactly that. And the agreements that we've signed with every province, every territory, $200 billion. Just today, we got baseline data that shows on surgical wait times and on making sure that the number of surgeries are provided, that we're back ahead of where we were prior to the pandemic. That on doctors and nurses, there are more doctors and nurses in virtually every province and every territory. We're making important progress.
The honourable member from Victoria.
While Canadians are worried about massive flooding and wildfires, Conservatives are rubbing elbows with the same CEOs who are fueling the climate crisis. The Conservative leader spent a night schmoozing with these executives at his $1,600 a plate fundraiser. He's not listening to hardworking Canadians. But the Liberals are no better. They met with oil and gas lobbyists 5 times a day. Shameful. Canadians should come first, not CEOs. So why are the Liberals ripping a page from the Conservative playbook and putting CEOs ahead of people?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as opposed to the Conservative leader, I can assure the member opposite that no oil lobbyists have organized fundraisers for me. But I would like to quote her colleague from her own party, Madam Speaker, the member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie, who said, as a New Democrat, as a progressive, as an environmentalist, we're in favor of putting a price on pollution, Mr. Speaker. Well, it would look like that under pressure from the Conservative, the NDP are no longer conservative, no longer progressive, no longer environmentalist, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today is a big day. The Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship just tabled the immigration levels plan for 2025-2027. This is a comprehensive plan that will align the number of newcomers to the supports available in the country, as immigration is essential to Canada from an economic, social and cultural perspective. A well-managed, robust immigration system is vital. Could the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship provide an update on our government's efforts towards ensuring a sustainable immigration system where everyone has a fair chance to succeed?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to personally thank the member for her contribution on this matter. She knows well as on this side of the House how important immigration is to this country, its past and its future. We need a manageable system that is controllable. This is what we are doing today with the levels plan. The reductions that we have proposed alleviate the impacts on infrastructure and housing. It's something that Canadians can be immensely proud of, and we should be very proud of the immigrants that continue to build this country and make it better than what it is today.
Yeah.
The honourable member from Kildone and St. Paul.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, violent crime is up and police have had enough, Mr. Speaker. Frontline officers in Toronto, York, Vancouver, Surrey are all slamming the Prime Minister for his self-congratulatory social media campaign where he promoted his failed handgun policy that has done nothing to stop violent gun crime, which is up, in fact, by 116% since the Liberals took power 9 years ago. When is the Prime Minister going to stop patting himself on the back for his failures and start listening to police?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, one important difference between our government and the Conservative Party is we don't believe assault-style military firearms have their place on Canadian streets. We have made those firearms, Mr. Speaker, illegal. We're taking steps to compensate law-abiding gun owners that purchase these rifles, particularly so we can remove them from the streets. That's something that police officers in my conversations have been very supportive of, and they're very worried, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservative Party have plans to, in fact, evacuate all those important measures. That's not in the interest of public safety.
That's right.
The honourable member from Kildonan St. Paul.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to let the police association speak for themselves to that Liberal minister and to this Liberal Prime Minister. From Surrey, BC, quote, the federal handgun freeze fails to address the real issue, which is the surge of illegal firearms coming across our border ending up in the hands of violent criminals. From Vancouver, BC, quote, stopping legal sales won't stop criminals from getting guns illegally. You're only restricting law-abiding citizens while doing little to address actual gun violence. When is the Prime Minister going to stop working against police, stop going after law-abiding citizens, and start going after the real problem, criminals? When are they?
The honourable minister for public safety.
Mr. Speaker, I was surprised that our colleague raised the issue of border security. Our government, unlike the Conservative government previously, has invested precisely so the Canadian Border Services Agency would be able to interdict these illegal firearms crossing our borders. Mr. Speaker, we work with the RCMP, their policing partners, and border services. The Conservatives cut the funding to these agencies, laid off hundreds of border services agents, and had in fact plans to cut another 800. The good news, Mr. Speaker, is they lost the 2015 election. We reinvested in those important priorities for Canadians and will continue to do so.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, crime is up because the Prime Minister's policies are failing. The Toronto Police Association says that violent crime is up 78% since these Liberals came into power. Shootings are up 45% since last year. Gun-related homicides up 62% since last year. So when will the Prime Minister start listening to police associations across Canada and admit he's adding to the crime wave, not fighting it?
That's right. Good question. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Procurator General.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that member's contributions to the House. I just don't appreciate the hypocrisy. What I would say is that assault-style rifles aren't used for hunting deers. That's why we're taking them out of circulation. What I would also say with respect to guns and gangs is that if you don't want guns in our society, then you need to regulate the border. That's why we've invested over $390 million into the CBSA, exact money amounts that were cut by that party. He wasn't there yet, so I can't fault him in particular, but I will fault his party for not doing anything to keep our border safe and to keep guns out of our country.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Minister of Justice continues to reveal just how out of touch this government is. And we have real-time evidence of it. Just less than 3 hours ago, there was a shooting in Toronto near Shepherd and Yonge, not far actually from the Minister of Justice's riding. And in that situation, a person is now lying in the hospital in life-threatening condition. So when will this government actually take responsibility for the crime that it's causing and listen to the police?
That's right. Good question. The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General.
I can assure that member that I listen to the police all of the time. And you know what they tell me? They tell me that when you take guns out of circulation, what you do is you help on things like gender-based violence and domestic violence that occurs because women are getting killed because guns are in the homes. When you pass a bill like C-21, you disable that from happening because you ensure that you're keeping women in this country safe. That is a priority, or should be a priority, for this entire parliament. It's just really shocking that that member doesn't get it.
The honourable member for Drummond.
Okay.
All right. The honourable member for Drummond. Yesterday, in response to a question posed by the leader of the Bloc Québécois, the Prime Minister stated that what happened at Bedford School was just a matter of teachers' freedom of expression. I'm sorry, but imposing religious values in your classroom is not a matter of freedom of expression. This is exactly why we need secularism, which allows everybody to believe or not believe whatever they want. They only have to consult their own conscience freely. Do these Liberals realize that they are attacking Quebecers' freedom of conscience? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a great deal of respect for my colleague, but what he just said is revolting. The Prime Minister never said that. On several occasions, the Prime Minister has said that it is unacceptable that children in Quebec be treated in this manner. And he also said that it is up to the government of Quebec to take care of this issue. The Honourable Member for Drummond. We tried to talk to this Prime Minister about religious intolerance, and he has nothing more to say than that Liberals will always defend freedom of expression. Well, first of all, let me just say that religion is not necessarily a shining example of freedom of expression. But when there's an adult forcing their religious convictions on their classroom, that is not a matter of freedom. Religion belongs in the private sphere. We need to protect the separation of church and state, and yet the Liberals will be challenging that in the courts. Will this Liberal government finally commit to not challenging Bill 21, directly or indirectly? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Once again, I am very disappointed by the doubtful arguments made by my colleague. First of all, I want to remind everyone, including those listening at home, is that respecting children's safety and dignity is everyone's responsibility. But when it comes to education jurisdiction, that's up to the government of Quebec.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. And violent gun crime is up 116% in Canada in just 9 years. Now, following the Prime Minister's out-of-touch comments, the Vancouver Police Association stated the Prime Minister is, quote, not aware of the ongoing gang war here in BC, which is putting both our members and public at risk on a daily basis. Right. Will the NDP Liberals listen to police and finally admit that their soft on crime policies are leading to the crime wave in Canada? Right.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, one thing that's definitely up are slogans in this House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, we have said clearly that we will support law enforcement both at the RCMP and in terms of their partners in policing, including police in British Columbia, municipal police in British Columbia. That's why we renewed the Guns and Gangs program, Mr. Speaker, that precisely puts money in the hands of these brave women and men who serve in municipal and provincial police forces so they can do the exact work that my colleague pretends she wants them to be able to do.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's the police themselves that are saying that the policies of this Liberal government are a failure. And Conservatives are listening to police who know the facts about gun violence, public safety, and the real impact in our communities. Now, following the Prime Minister's out-of-touch comments, the Surrey Police Union stated, quote, the federal handgun freeze fails to address the real issue, the surge of illegal firearms coming across our borders and ending up in the hands of violent criminals, unquote. 85% of seized firearms are traced back to the United States. So why doesn't the Prime Minister listen to our law enforcement by starting to crack down on smuggled guns from the U.S.?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government did precisely that. It listened to law enforcement professionals who asked us to reverse the cuts of the previous Harper government to the women and men who serve in our Border Services Agency and who do that excellent work at border crossings across the country. We also invested, Mr. Speaker, in the RCMP, who have responsibility between border crossings and who work with American partners on organized crime. We're doing the very work that our colleague on the other side pretends that she thinks is important. Why doesn't she support our government in removing assault-style firearms off the streets of Canada?
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Toronto, St. Paul's.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. The Prime Minister wants to pat himself on the back, but the data in the Toronto Police Association say he's out of touch. Last year in Toronto, we saw a 45% increase in shootings and a 62% increase in gun-related homicides. In St. Paul's, 2 people were murdered in Oakwood. A police officer was shot in Yonge and Eglinton, and armed home invasions happen every day. The Liberals make life easy for career criminals with their catch and release bail policies. When will this government finally come up with a plan to stop the crime and bring home safe streets?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, if that member expects us to apologize for taking assault-style weapons off of the streets, he's not going to get that. If that member thinks we're going to apologize for keeping women safe from domestic violence by implementing a handgun freeze, he's not going to get that apology. If that member thinks we're not going to take seriously the mental health impacts of suicides that are related to guns being in the homes, he's not going to get that apology. What he should do is actually think about what the police are asking for. They're asking for help with keeping Canadians safe. That's what we do every day on this side of the House.
L'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
The leader of the Conservatives has continued his party's tradition of inaction and negligence by refusing to get a security clearance. He chooses to play political games instead of working for Canadians to combat foreign interference. That's not common sense, Mr. Speaker. That's nonsense. Can the Minister of Justice and Attorney General tell Canadians how our government has taken historic action on foreign interference?
The Honourable Minister. Oh, one moment, please. The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General.
I thank the member from Lac-Saint-Louis for that important question. The Conservative leader continues to ignore national security. Instead of protecting Canadians, he prioritizes his partisan interests. This is not serious leadership, Mr. Speaker. I'll explain it in three-word slogans just so that the Conservative leader gets it. It's time to get the clearance, take the briefing, protect the country. It's that simple.